Warhammer terrain is expensive. A single Warhammer building will set you back at least 50 quid, probably even more. So I wanted to find out if you could build something that looks just as good for a fraction of the price. I've seen terrain built with coffee stirrers or lollipop sticks. This is a budget option and most people can get coffee stirrers for free. I need to find out 3 things. 1, are they easy to build with? 2, do they look good painted? And 3, are they actually worth your time? Bought this box of lollipop sticks for $5. So let's see if you can make amazing terrain or is it just a scam. If you want a painting army to match your painted terrain, click the link in the description for our free painting guides. Start by building the ends of the building first. Line up the lollipop sticks, then mark out a doorway, checking the size against the space green. Cut the sticks to size with side cutting pliers, then arrange the sticks in a straight line. I use a spare stick to check this. One straight, glue them in a line with a cross beam and a couple of short beams at the bottom of the sticks. At this point I start to realise the lollipop sticks were various sizes and they were slightly warped. This made it impossible to create a straight wall, but we'll tie this up later. For the sides, line up the lollipop sticks again and mark out the windows. Cut the holes for windows, then line up the sticks ready to be glued. The 2 sticks at the top and the bottom of the wall, check that the sticks are in line. Then glue these as cross beams to keep the sticks in place. Once this is dried, cut off any cross beams sticking out of the sides. I'll repeat this step a few times, then use a couple of cross beams to glue the 2 sides together. Now you should have a basic structure of the 4 sides of your building. To glue the sides together, I did a dry fit a couple of times to work out where they would meet. Then add some tabs to make the joint stronger. I propped up the side to make sure the tabs set in the right place. Once the tabs have dried, glue the 2 sides together. I did a dry fit and marked out the areas to be glued, then applied the glue and stuck the sides together. I repeated this step to create 2 halves of the building, so this step took more time than I thought it would. When trying to glue the 2 halves together, I tried to use the tab method, but this didn't work. So I glued additional bits to increase the surface area, but this didn't work either. In the end, I used super glue to stick the 2 halves together. But that's fine because this is where most people give up and decide it's a scam. But stick with me because this thing's going to look completely different by the end. To start building the roof, build 4 triangles of equal size with additional tie across the top for strength. To support the triangles, build some struts. They should be the same length as the building. Because my building is 2 sticks long, I glued 2 lollipop sticks together with a 3rd one. Then glue the triangles to the struts. I used a wooden block to support the triangles while the roof set. The 4 triangles will give the roof its shape and some strength. The taller you make the triangles, the larger the area of the roof will be, and you'll need more roof tiles later. This step is harder because the terrain is scratch built. I would expect shop built terrain to have tabs to make this step easier. The triangles were glued so that they could support the sticks that the tiles would sit on. To add some interest to the building, glue sticks across the end triangles from left to right so that they are in a different direction to the rest of the building. Once they are dried, snip off the ends that were longer than the original triangle. After this, glue the beams that would support the roof tiles. I glued 1 half to the roof first. I wanted the sticks to end in the middle of the roof and be an equal distance apart. The top beam should be as close to the top of the roof as possible. The second side was glued so that the ends touched the first side and so the beams were in line with the existing beams. After all the beams were cut, start cutting the tiles. I measured 1 tile as a template, then got to work cutting. I tried to use any offcuts from previous stages, reducing the number of sticks needed. Then glue on the roof tiles. Start at the bottom, gluing the tiles across the whole beam before moving up to the next beam. I made sure the tiles overlapped the previous beam and were offset to look like a real roof. When I got to the top, I glued the tile up as high as possible to minimise the gap with the other side, so it didn't look like there was a hole in the roof. This is the moment I stopped thinking it was a scam. Then I started to add details to the building to cover any rough edges. To hide the messy joints, glue some additional lollipop sticks over the corners. These were painted black to look like timber frames you see on English cottages. I used 2 lollipop sticks to create flat ends and hide the rounded ends of the lollipop sticks. Next, I start to frame the windows to hide any messy cuts made at the start. Glue a length of lollipop stick to the top and bottom of the window. Creates a window lintel and the window sill. Then add some shutters to the windows. These will be painted an accent colour and will pop once the building is finished. Then, to hide the curved ends of the lollipop sticks, frame the walls with lollipop sticks. This covers any mistakes and any lollipop sticks being shorter than the others. To add the doors, through the door frame so it overhangs the gap. This creates a lip to glue the door to. The door is made by sticking lollipop sticks to the back of the frame, which hides the gap between the door and the wall. Before I paint this, if you need any dry brushing or weathering tools, everything we sell is linked below. Prime the building black to cover any areas you don't paint. This means areas you can't reach will be black, so you don't need to stress about painting them. Slap on a tan brown base coat onto the walls. This doesn't need to be perfect because any variation in colour will add to a natural worn look. Then dry brush the walls with Zandri dust. This was heavier on the areas that receive more light, like the tops of the walls that aren't close to the roof. Paint the shutters and doors an olive green. This will provide some cool warm contrast to the rest of the building. Dry brush lighter green on the same areas, focusing on the top edge of the shutters and the middle of the door. Any other details were painted black. This colour choice was inspired by quaint cottages you see in the English countryside. Base coat the ends of the roof a dark brown. Because the roof will be casting a shadow over these areas, they will be painted darker to show this. Follow that with a mid grey dry brush. This will pick out the grain of the wood. Dry brushing picks out the grain of the wood, easily showing that the building is made of wood. This is impossible to recreate with other materials, and this is where Lollipop shine as a building material. Paint the tiles a rich plum colour, trying to paint the grain so it is less pronounced. Then dry brush the roof a crimson red. This is heavier around the edges and apex of the roof. Then sponge the whole building with patches of oil washers. Not sorry sponges and washers were used for this step. I used my mud grind and carbon washers and the heavy weathering sponges and sponge holder. This created some variance in the tones of each part of the building, some shading and weathering all in one step. To tie everything together, dry brush it with Zandri dust. This highlights everything after the washers and brings it all together as well. Then paint the final dry brush with Rakarth flesh. This was applied to only the areas that received the most light this day will be the brightest points. So, scam? If you enjoy making terrain, it's a light and affordable material to build with. Some of the struggles I had would happen with any similar material. The building looked good once it was painted, the grain of the wood looked realistic, and this is impossible to recreate with other materials that aren't made of wood. But if you just want to make terrain quickly to game with, I'll look at other affordable options like cardboard and MDF terrain. And if you have a 3D printer, it goes brrrr. Free painting guides are in the description if you want to take it further.